My next guest is one of the House Democrats who've put out a plan called the Reopen America Act that relies on science, yes, science, to make reopening the economy safe. Joining me now is Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's a member of the House Oversight and Reform Committee. Congressman, according to Congressman Hollingsworth, it's not zero evil. So if a few people have to die to get Wall Street cooking again, I mean, you have a better plan than that?
Yes, that's just derangement and madness, Joy. Look, we need a real plan. And right now, there are three kinds of plans that are out there. There's Donald Trump, which is no plan at all. He published his flabby guidelines for the states on Thursday, basically making recommendations about what the states should do with respect to schools and restaurants and businesses. It's not a plan. It doesn't mention the federal government or federal role in spearheading the production of the testing kits and equipment that we need. It totally abdicates federal authority. So that's not a plan. That's not going to work. Then there are these coalitions of states that are forming, and that's pretty promising what Governor Cuomo has done in the Northeast with a bunch of states, what's happening out on the West Coast. But of course, if it just stays at that level, it's like the Articles of Confederation. It's a bunch of states who were competing for equipment now trying to get together, but there's no national leadership. There's no national responsibility for production of the equipment that we need. There's no national investment in guidelines that will bring us together as a country. So we've introduced yesterday the Reopen America Act. In, I think it was 2 days, we got more than 52 co-sponsors. And I've been working with Congresswoman Donna Shalala, who you know was Secretary of Health and Human Services under the Clinton administration, on putting this together. And it's a real plan. And what the plan says is we're going to be guided by science. And what do the scientists tell us? The public health authorities, the epidemiologists say a state's ready to open when two conditions are met. One, the hospitals can meet the demand, so they're no longer in a crisis overload situation. And two, the infection rate is below 1. And what that means is that each person who gets the disease is infecting no more than one other person, which means then the slope of the curve is downward. If they're infecting more than one person, then the slope is upward, and we're back in a pandemic kind of situation. So once those two conditions are met, we're saying the Secretary of HHS can receive the reopening plans from the states, and then we will spearhead a national testing regime, a national contact tracing regime. We will approve state plans that institute the right public health safeguards for education, for the workplace, for commerce, for social life. We'll work with them with the best scientific experts we've mobilized to make sure it works. We approve the plans, and then we pay for it. The federal government will pay for your plan. So it's not King Kong stuff where we're going to boss them around, nor is it the kind of lethal indifference and negligence of the Trump approach, which is whatever happens in the states happens. It's taking a meaningful central role for the national government and letting federalism work its magic. The federal government working together with the states to approve these plans and bring people back online so we can move quickly if there's any recurrence anywhere. But if we go Trump's route, we're going to have immediate outbreaks and shutdowns following.
Yeah, well, that sounds logical. I'm not sure that they're going to go for that, but it sounds like a good idea. Let me have you hold on just for a second, Congressman. I want to add to this conversation MSNBC presidential historian Michael Beschloss, who's also the author of Presidents of War, and we love talking to Michael. So I want to add you to this because what you just heard the congressman lay out is a logical way that you would use science and put that in the mix in order to reopen the economy in a safe way and not have further outbreaks. I want to show you on the other side of that. Here's the people who listen to Donald Trump. This is in Minnesota. This was one of these protests, these, made up protests that they've put together outside of the governor's mansion in Minnesota. Take a listen to this.
I want to get going for the economy. This whole thing is a hoax. This whole propaganda. It's a made-up thing by the WHO, by the CDC, by Bill Gates. Do you want to have someone stick a microchip in your hand and track you from the cradle to the grave? Does that make sense? It don't make sense to me. But if that's what you like, go with that. Maybe you can be the first in line for the vaccine and see how that works for you.
This sounds a bit off key here, a bit crazy. This is somebody saying he doesn't seem to want a vaccine. He thinks they're going to put a microchip in him. He wants to go back to work. Essentially, he's willing to die for the economy. What is this?
And if he doesn't like Big Brother, how did he like it this week when Donald Trump said that as a president, he has total authority and total power? You've got a president who every day says something different. One day he said he had total authority under the Constitution, which he doesn't. There are checks and balances by other three branches and by governors and by people, at the local level and citizens. And then the next day, it's all on the governors. Jamie's absolutely right. This is not the Articles of Confederation of the 1780s. We're in a situation where, at least since the New Deal, we expect presidents to act in an emergency and orchestrate a response.
Yeah, and yet Donald Trump wants both, right? He wants all of the power and the grandeur of being president. He wants the praise and adulation of it. But he doesn't want to take any responsibility for anything that happens. He's like, you governors deal with that. But he wants them to say that he's in charge. That's what it sounds like. Just say I'm the boss.
That's exactly right. He wants the power, but not the responsibility. John Kennedy in 1961 had this famous fiasco with the bad pigs in Cuba. He took full responsibility. Oddly enough, his Gallup poll approval rating went up to its highest point in the 80s. Kennedy said, it's amazing. The worse I do, the more popular I get.
Congressman Raskin, I don't mean this to seem facetious, but it's almost as if you all did the plan that you're talking about, that already, as you said, has 50 co-sponsors, but named it the Trump is Awesome and the Greatest President in History of the Earth Act, that maybe he'd sign it. Maybe not even because he's not going to read it. It seems that all Trump really wants is praise. So maybe if you just renamed it something that said Trump is awesome, would you think he'd sign it?
But I would take that. It's already called the Reopen America Act, but we could call it the Donald Trump True Federalism Reopen America Act. And if he's willing to go with it, look, we're talking about saving lives here. We have no plan at the federal level. We were all waiting with bated breath to see what the president would release on Thursday when he said he was going to come out with his plan. And the plan was a bunch of recommendations for what he thinks the states should do if and when they reopen. It was completely useless and worthless. And the day before, he had said he was totally in control. So he just oscillates between being King Kong and then being a complete bystander. But we need real national political leadership, and that's the role of Congress. And so we've got to get Congress back to Washington. We've got to get back in session, and we need to pass a responsible plan guided by science to build the equipment that we need, to assemble the scientists we need, to work with the states to get back into business. And we're creating a health equipment production board, which Professor Beschloss will recognize as based on war production boards from prior periods in American history. We need to centralize the authority so we don't have states in bidding wars against each other, fighting for the materials they need to take care of our people. We've got to act like one nation again. And if the president doesn't know how to do it, and I say that with all respect, Congress does know how to do it. We've got to get the House together, the Senate together. We've got to pass a Reopen America Act. We will take all the best ideas, including mobile testing, which my colleague Jim Clyburn has rightly been focusing people on, because a lot of the rural areas need mobile testing. We need much more diligent contact tracing. We can do this if we pull the country together, and we shouldn't waste too much more time talking about the derangement of the president's press conferences, because it's a distraction from what we need to be doing now.
Yeah, I mean, and, Michael, it seems to me that Donald Trump loves power and he loves grandeur. It is surprising that he wouldn't want to take the example of probably the most powerful, the president who exerted the most power that we've seen in the 20th century, which is FDR, who took complete command of the economy. And so he doesn't seem to want to follow that example, because I guess the ideologues around him are saying, no, 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 that's socialism. But that is also power. It is odd to me that he wouldn't want to utilize something like the Defense Production Act, where he could take control of it.
Totally agree. Roosevelt didn't say, gee, I think I'll call up the governor of Missouri and see if he'll send me a submarine. Or Dwight Eisenhower in the 1950s, the Interstate Highway Act didn't say, well, maybe Nebraska can build a highway here and we can get another state to hook another. The NASA in the 1960s, we didn't have, someone say to the governor of Florida, can you build us a rocket and fire it off? That is what the modern United States is. That's what the modern presidency is. And most of all, you're absolutely right, Joy, with someone with as many delusions of grandeur as Donald Trump has, you'd think he'd want to follow in the footsteps of great presidents.